21st Century Conversations. I'm Nzinga Shani. Our conversation this evening is about surviving cancer, a team approach. Cancer is that dreaded word, that dreaded disease that people are so afraid of getting. But in fact, many people do get cancer. Some people survive and others don't. And tonight we're going to talk about what does survival mean. You know, is it 1 year or 2 years or 10 years of life? What exactly does it mean to survive cancer? Well, but first we're going to talk about what is cancer and what is happening with cancer patients or people getting cancer, not only here in the US or even here in New Haven, but throughout the world. And to have this conversation with me this evening, in the first half of our program, I have Carolyn Taylor. Carolyn Taylor is a photographer and a cancer survivor. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have a unique story.
Yes, I guess
and
I do.
We really are very interested in hearing your story and what you're doing as a result of having been diagnosed with 2 different forms of cancer. What you're doing to help others. So tell us a little about you and your story.
Okay, great. In 2006, I was diagnosed with ovarian and endometrial cancers. I was incredibly fortunate because I was diagnosed at a very early stage of the disease. After I recovered, I really felt compelled to help others that weren't as lucky as I was. In 2010, I entered a British Airways contest that, in fact, I won, and that gave me 10 international flights anywhere in the world. And I used those flights to document the global face of cancer. So I traveled from March 2010 to March 2011, over 100,000 miles, and over 4.5 months to 15 different countries, interviewing, photographing cancer patients, cancer survivors, caregivers, and healthcare professionals in an attempt to show the global face of cancer in the world.
Well, you said you were diagnosed with 2 primary cancers. Were you diagnosed with both at the same time?
Same time. They were both stage 1, stage 1B ovarian and stage 1 uterine.
Now, what happened to you? What symptoms did you have? What led you to getting the the test that diagnosed these cancers?
Well, I was very lucky because I was had no symptoms yet. So, but I was a very compliant patient. My mother had breast cancer at 24, and her mother had passed away from breast cancer, and her mother's mother had some sort of female cancer that we're not even sure of. So I was very diligent about my checkups, going to the doctor all the time, and I had a great OBGYN who really just did thorough exams on me all the time.
So your mother was diagnosed with cancer, and your mother said to you, her mother died of cancer, so you
yeah,
should...
she lived with us. I watched her, took care of her. I was 11 years old.
Oh, so you knew your grandmother, you knew she had cancer. And what kind of conversation did your mother have with you that led you to being so vigilant?
Well, my mother was really vigilant about her continued health care. So she just instilled that in us from when we were young. If you're ill, you go to the doctor. You don't wait, you just go and you get it taken care of. And you also need to be in charge of your own health care because you're the most important person. You know your body better than anyone else. So, really important to take charge of your own health care.
And so, boy, that is really good. Now, your mother is she alive?
She's 83 now.
She's 83 years old. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit. So you won this contest. You got this 10 trips internationally. Yeah. What led you? What it is about what happened to you that led you to want to go to other parts of the world rather than staying right here in the States? To document these various forms of...
Well, I really wanted to show that, photographically document this global face of cancer, but I wanted to show that we're all intrinsically linked through cancer, that it doesn't matter your race, religion, economic status, your nationality, we're all together in the battle against cancer. So that was the premise of it, and British Airways is an international. It had to do with the program also that British Airways was offering, and it just all kind of came together.
Oh, so I see.
But also my surgeon, my oncologist, traveled around the world through Mount Sinai, his program, doing surgery, and he would tell me, you know, every 2 months you have to see your oncologist at the beginning. He would tell me about where he went. I was like, well, how can I help these people, you know?
Do you mind me asking, how old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was 43.
You were 43. Now, you said your mother was diagnosed at age 21?
24.
24? And she's now how old?
83.
80?
So, yeah, she'll be 84 this year. So, yeah, she's almost
84.
a 60-year survivor.
I didn't know that 60 years ago we knew anything about treating, you know,
She had a really,
people.
you know, a radical mastectomy that was really debilitating to her and really difficult. But, you know, she did survive. It is a pretty amazing story.
Okay, we're going to show some images of people who have, who you have photographed, people who have had cancer, and some caregivers.
Yes.
And we're going to tell our audience very briefly about some of these people. So we're going to start with image number 1. And this, tell us briefly about her.
This is Harmala Gupta, and she's a great inspiration to me. She was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkins when she was 33 years old.
Okay.
And she survived the Hodgkins, and she was treated, actually she's from India, but she was treated in Canada. She was there studying to get her doctorate. She went back to India and started the first cancer support group in the country.
So she went back, she went to India?
She went home to India.
Okay.
She's from India. She was actually studying in Canada, and that's where she received her treatment. So she was so impressed by the cancer support groups in Canada that she went home and started the first.
And she was
cancer
under
support
33
group.
years old.
She was 33 years old, and she was stage 4 lymphoma, or Hodgkins, sorry.
She was stage 4.
She was stage 4.
And she's still alive?
She's still alive. And, you know, doing incredible things to help people in India.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So as we show these images, we're only going to keep them up on the screen for a very short time so people can just see the image, and then we're going to take them down and talk about them. So image number 2 is your mom.
That's my mom. Yeah.
Yes. Dorothy Kapica.
This was just a few years ago. She looks
Yes.
pretty good for 83. She was probably 80 in this photo.
And now we want to talk about her because, as we said, she was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 24. What kind of, besides the radical mastectomy, and for the audience who want to say a radical mastectomy is removal of the breast, all the breast tissue, and what else? Lymph nodes?
Lymph nodes, pretty much everything. Back then it was really radical. You know, they said they scrape you down to your ribs, you know, really to get the tissue off. So, you know, really difficult.
But she has survived for 60 years.
She has. There was no other treatment available to her at that point either. So
now, when Dr. Sant joined us, we're going to talk about if the fact that your grandmother and your mother had cancer might be responsible for the fact that you also had cancer at age 43.
Possibly. I've
Had
been
the doctor
tested.
said anything?
Yeah, I was tested for the BRCA gene, but I tested negative actually. But they consider me BRCA identical because of my family history.
Okay, and we want to say BRCA1 and BRCA2 are 2 genes that have been found to be genetic carriers of the for cancer, and it doesn't necessarily mean breast cancer. It can be if you're a BRCA1 and 2 positive, you can be ovarian, prostate cancer.
My father had prostate cancer also.
So you had cancer on both sides of your family from more than one generation.
Right. So I also pretty much knew I had a very good chance of having cancer.
Which
so that's
is
why I
why
was
you're
more
so
diligent.
vigilant. Yes, and we want to say as we go along with this program, we are trying to share as much as we can with the audience. Say it is important that you know your family's medical history and that you be vigilant and attentive to your own care because you never know what you have inherited down the line. So the next image we have is of Rosemary Okeyo, and that's a breast cancer patient in Kenya.
Yeah, I met her. She had just come from having her blood work done before she was going to have her 3rd round of chemotherapy. She'd had a mastectomy, although when she was first diagnosed, she really considered it a death sentence.
I know you said with this woman she had given up.
She was really considering not continuing treatment, and I met her and told her my story and my mother's story, and she couldn't believe it because everyone she had ever met before that had had cancer had died. Everyone.
And she's in Kenya, so maybe in Kenya, do you know if they have any treatment facilities?
They do. They don't have great treatment facilities. In most of the developing world, patients are diagnosed, 70 to 80% of patients are diagnosed in late stages of the disease.
70 to 80% are diagnosed.
Because there's such a lack of awareness and education about cancer.
And this is why public education and I think programs such as we're doing are so important to make people aware of information and what they can do. And of course, luckily for us in the United States, we have cancer treatment centers.
Yes.
Right here in Greater New Haven, we have 2. We have a cancer treatment center in Hartford, maybe more than 1 in Hartford. So there's really no reason in Connecticut for us not to have the information and not to be attentive. Okay, let us look at the next image of another woman, Iba. And Iba, and she is a breast cancer survivor, and she's from the West Bank. So tell us about her.
So very difficult on the West Bank to have treatment. There's only one hospital in the entire West Bank that does radiation therapy. One hospital.
Yes.
But it's actually not on the Palestinian side, it's on the Israeli side.
The hospital is on the Israeli side.
It's on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem.
Yes.
So to get that treatment, which is generally radiation is every day for a period of time, you have to have a special pass to get to the hospital. And depending on the politics that day of both governments and what's going on, people can't necessarily get through the checkpoint and get to the to get their chemo or their radiation therapy.
This is the checkpoint. This is from where?
The back of the hospital. You can actually look down and see the checkpoint where they're supposed to be receiving treatment, yet they can't get there. And it's all because of politics. And I just think it's unconscionable that people can't receive their treatment.
Okay, so they might go there and have to go back home.
Yeah.
They might not
be able to get it that day.
Depending on what is going on politically that day. Okay, and so again, you know, we're showing these images to say to people, we in the United States, we're very fortunate. And so it is just for us to access the information because the information is there. And just for us to access the facilities because the facilities are there. We don't have checkpoints. And so there's really no excuse. And we have lots of free public information. Programs such as this one is a 1-hour program, is free. You know, if you have a cable system, or you can go to the library and get to see, or you can go onto the One World website and watch clips from programs such as these, and it doesn't cost you anything. Now, let's look at some caregivers now. The next image is the mother of Lou Van Hue, and this is in Vietnam.
Yes.
And you can see you know, in that image, like she has the weight of everything on her.
She does. You know, she truly does. She's 73 and taking care of her 43-year-old son.
She's taking care of her 43-year-old son.
Yeah. So he had leukemia, and she was there at the hospitals in Vietnam. There's only 4 cancer hospitals in the country. And they don't provide caregivers or really extended nursing. And
you mean the hospital doesn't?
No, multiple patients even share beds because there's such a shortage of beds. So a caregiver has to come with. This is very common in most developing nations. Caregivers have to come with the family members to feed them, to take care of them.
You're saying that the caregiver, they don't feed them in the hospital?
No, they don't have the facilities or the means to do that. It's just too expensive and they can't do it.
Oh my God. So she goes to the hospital.
She stays at the hospital with him. She'll sleep on a lawn chair out in the courtyard.
Do we have a picture of her son? Is that
we do. We have a picture of the 2 of them together.
Let's see the next image, please. Okay, so that's she taking care of her 43-year-old son. And we take it that he does not survive.
No, he did not have a very good prognosis.
I see. Okay.
So it was basically palliative care that they were administering.
So it was palliative care, just to keep him maybe as comfortable as possible.
As comfortable as they could at this point.
But in this hospital in Vietnam, the patients do not get food.
No.
There's no nurse to bathe them or clean them.
No.
So
they share. There's another person in the bed next to him.
There are 2 people in the same bed. So the hospital is there just to administer the medication.
Medication, chemotherapy, radiation. This hospital is one of the smaller cancer hospitals in the country, and they can't even, when they do surgery, they can't even do a frozen section because they only have one microscope. They also have one ultrasound, one radiation therapy machine. They don't have CAT scan or MRI. So it's a really difficult situation for patients there.
Oh my God. Okay. Now let us go to Ho Chi Minh City. Let's look at the next image.
This kind of shows you, right, what the conditions are like in the hospitals. Ho Chi Minh City is definitely the largest of the 4 cancer hospitals. There's multiple patients in each bed, and patients even on the floor underneath the bed.
Patients are on the floor under the bed, and there are multiple patients in the bed.
Right.
And this is in a regular oncology hospital.
It is. This is the largest oncology hospital. It has 1,200 beds, but on average 3,000 patients.
3,000? And how many beds?
That's inpatient care, not even day patient.
And how many beds?
1,200.
Oh my God.
Yeah, do the math.
1,200
plus their caregivers
beds.
that are there with them.
Okay. And let's then see the next one. This is the women's.
This is a small section of the women's cervical cancer unit at the Ho Chi Minh City Oncology Hospital also.
Okay. And those are all women. Now, do we?
They're sharing, they're sharing beds.
They're sharing beds also. Okay. And
there's no glass actually on the windows there. If you saw that photo, they don't even have glass on the windows. So
no glass on the windows?
No, and there's generally like 1, maybe 2 bathrooms on each floor.
So what happens when it rains?
There's a little bit of an overhang, but people are just pretty used to it. It's no air conditioning, no, it's just really difficult.
Okay. Let us go to the next one.
Sure. Oh, Edwin Ellis.
Yes, this is...
And his father, yeah.
Okay, so that's a father and son. The son is 12 years old.
This is in Tanzania in the Ocean Road Cancer Institute.
Okay.
He's 12, and he had a very good prognosis. He was actually diagnosed early with leukemia.
Thank you.
His father brought him. His mother had to stay home and work and stay with the other children. But the father actually had to leave him as well. So he was having a 4-week series of chemotherapy every day, which is the protocol for his leukemia. But the father had to leave him after 3 days. So this 12-year-old boy was going to be at the hospital alone, receiving his chemotherapy for
Now, how would you get food? Now, in this hospital?
Actually, at Ocean Road Cancer Hospital, they do feed you. There's no running water on the floor, but they feed you.
There's no running water?
There's no running water.
So they don't get bathed or anything?
Well, no. No. There's 2 nurses, I think, for the whole ward, which I can show you the photo of the ward next, where he was going to be, which is very similar to conditions.
Okay.
It's very similar to conditions in Vietnam.
Okay, so let us just show this picture briefly so people see. Now, this is the oncology ward.
This is the children's ward.
This is the children's ward. And the adults, they're clearly parents.
Right. The
Our parents are caregivers.
Yes, absolutely. And there's other siblings, too, that have to come sometimes because they can't leave them home. But the Ocean Road Cancer Institute is the largest, it's the only, actually, cancer facility in Tanzania where you can receive chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And it has 100 beds, and there's only 4 oncologists in the entire country of Tanzania.
And then, do we know how many people live in Tanzania?
There's 45 million people in Tanzania.
45 million people, and they have 4 oncologists.
Yeah.
In the entire country.
Yeah.
Not in the hospital, in the entire country. And so when these people go to the hospital, if they live very far away, which some of them do, since they're on
they have to stay there for long periods of time. They'll come 5 days on a bus for treatment, and it's very difficult conditions there. Sometimes they don't have even enough cannula, so people can't have their chemotherapy that day. It's a really difficult life for people if you have cancer in the developing world.
Let's go to the next one.
Sure.
Oh, yes, this is the one that just struck a chord with me.
She's adorable, this little girl.
Yes.
So she had a pretty large tumor in her stomach, but they couldn't diagnose her. because they don't have a CAT scan or an MRI. They only have X-rays. They don't have a blood bank there either. So unfortunately, they were treating her with chemotherapy that they thought might help, and it was reducing her symptoms and alleviating her symptoms. But, you know, they couldn't really diagnose her.
So they don't really know what type of cancer she has.
No, that's really common, and they can't really stage people's cancers either. So, and a lot of times if you're stage 1 or stage 4, you get the exact same treatment.
Oh my
because they can't really diagnose well.
Chances are her prognosis is not.
It may not be.
It's not good.
Be great.
Okay. Now we want the next one we're going to see is in Thailand of uterine cancer.
Yes. So this was Khun Nonyao, who is a survivor of uterine cancer.
That's great. Yes.
She's great, but she took care of her daughter. Her son-in-law had died from asbestos poisoning in 2009, and then her daughter was diagnosed with cervical cancer.
Yes. Now, I find her story really compelling because you said she lives in the slum of Bangkok.
She does. She lives in a one-room tin shed with her daughter and her three children, grandchildren.
So it was the daughter, the son-in-law, and 3 children.
3 children.
And the son-in-law died, and the daughter.
The daughter was diagnosed with cervical cancer.
Yes.
And so for the 4 months and 14 days that the daughter lived after her diagnosis, she took care of her in this little one-room tin shed.
Yes.
They didn't have money for hospital. They often didn't have money for morphine.
Oh,
and so she said at one point, you know, she just took her daughter's face in her hands and told her, you know, it's okay to go.
She told her to let go.
Yeah, just let go.
She should rather her daughter die than suffer like that.
Yeah, she said it was just torture for her to see her daughter suffer like that.
Okay. We're going to have to jump ahead to, there is a boy with skin cancer.
Oh, yes, Hassan.
Yes.
Yes.
Hassan. So, Hassan. Let's show Hassan's image, please, for 5 seconds. Okay, good. Let's talk about him. Okay, thank you. Yes,
so
go ahead.
In Tanzania, there are 150,000 albinos, the largest population of albinos in East Africa. And they are just devastated. They live on the equator and they don't have sunscreen.
They don't have sunscreen.
There's no skin cancer awareness there. So it's, you know, he's 26 years old and he's just, you know, decimated by
And I read that the life expectancy for albinos, especially with skin cancer, is about 30 years. And they are really put upon by the population.
Yes, absolutely. They're ostracized a bit by the population.
And they're ostracized really because they look different?
Yeah, absolutely.
And people don't understand why they look different? And are they ostracized also by their own families?
I don't think so by their own families, but by other people, and they're supposed to have magical powers. Some people believe that, you know. So although there are so many albinos, they're still put upon. You believe that people would become more, you know, accustomed to seeing so many of them? Yeah, no, definitely not there. It's just a really difficult life for them.
Okay.